I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to episode 132 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. Today we have a visit with Brad Parks.
International best-selling author Brad Parks is the only writer to have won the Shamus, Nero, and Lefty Awards, three of American crime fiction's most prestigious prizes. His novels have been translated into 15 languages and have won critical acclaim across the globe, including stars from every major pre-publication review outlet. A graduate of Dartmouth College, Parks is a former journalist with the Washington Post and the Newark, New Jersey Star-Ledger. He is now a full-time novelist living in Virginia with his wife and two school-aged children. Interference tells the story of quantum physicist Matt Bronik, who is suffering from strange, violent seizures that medical science seems powerless to explain, much to the consternation of his wife, Brigid. Matt doesn't think these fits could be related to his research, which he has always described as benign and esoteric. That, it turns out, is not quite true. Matt has been prodding the mysteries of the quantum universe with terrible repercussions for his health, and perhaps even for humanity as a whole. Then, in the midst of another seizure, Matt disappears. When foul play is feared, there is no shortage of suspects. Matt's research had gained the attention of Chinese competitors, an unscrupulous billionaire, and the Department of Defense, among others. With Matt's life in clear danger, Brigid sets out to find him. Will Matt be killed before she reaches him? Or could the physics that endangered him actually be used to save his life? We have on the program today Brad Parks, who has written a wonderful new book called Interference. Welcome, Brad.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Ann.
Your book takes place in Hanover, New Hampshire, and the surrounding area. Your descriptions of the area bring me back to good old DHMC and Dartmouth Medical School, where I worked for 10 years, and I grew up on Lake Sunapee.
Oh, wow. Okay, then yes, this was a trip down memory lane for you, wasn't it?
Why did you decide that was the perfect area to set the book?
And I'm lazy. That's why. So I went to Dartmouth College and am therefore very familiar with it. And we actually, before COVID hit anyway, we would go up to New Hampshire in the summertime. My wife got a job at a little summer camp not far from Hanover. So it kind of stayed fresh and familiar for me. So as I'm dreaming up this story, where I have a college professor as one of the critical characters, I thought, well, what college do I want to use? Well, how about the college I went to and know intimately? So it was straight up laziness. I just wanted to be able to know that I could deliver the world to readers with full vividness and full accuracy. Now, were you at the new Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, or were you at the old scary one?
When I started, it was the last 6 months of the old scary one.
Okay.
And for most of my time, I was at the new one.
I remember when they blew up the old scary one. I mean, because it was valuable real estate kind of in the middle of campus. This is big, old, hulking brick building, and we can't just have it staying here. That was late 90s sometimes. They finally got around to blowing that up. That was very exciting the day they blew that up.
Well, that whole area, it's just one of my favorite places in the world. I was born there.
You will get no argument from me, especially during the summertime. A lake in New Hampshire is just about the most wonderful place to be. I didn't want to make things too comfortable for my characters, so naturally I put them in the middle of winter, just so everything could be a little bit more miserable and dreary for them.
Bridgette Chronic was a really great character. She is the wife of Matt Bronik, the professor, and he's been kidnapped. She's really badass. She is not going to take no for an answer, and she wants her husband back. And she was also devoted to her child and her sister. Is she based on anyone particular in your life?
I think all of my characters, some hybrid of people I've met and thoughts I've had, and you kind of throw it all into a bag and mix it up, and that's what comes out. And it's funny how what comes out really feels distinct and different every time, at least to me. What made Brigid really come alive for me, she is a librarian who has hearing loss, right? Now, where did that come from? Now, I will admit, Kathy, that there is some real life inspiration for that. So I have a rule for my protagonists, and basically, I have to like them. I know there are authors out there who can write these really grim, nasty people. I just can't. I can't spend 400 pages with someone I don't like. So I'm brainstorming interference, and I meet this neighbor named Melissa, and I just like her. And it turns out she is a librarian who has hearing loss. A librarian with hearing loss is not exactly the prototypical protagonist of a thriller. And I just really liked the idea of exploring that. This is my 10th novel, so this is not my first time going around. But when I give a character an unusual trait, that's really part of what makes them come alive for me. And if they come alive for me, they'll come alive for the reader too. So Bridgette Chronic has a little bit of my neighbor Melissa in her, probably a little bit of my wife in her. I'll freely admit that all of my female characters, especially the ones who are moms, probably I borrow some of my wife. And yes, my wife is a real badass. And then there's just part of her that's truly her in the sense that once you put characters on a page and have them start acting, they really do take on a life of their own. When I used to hear authors say that, I would think to myself, yeah, this guy's a nutbag. What do you mean taking on a life of their own? And then it actually started happening for me. So there is part of Bridgette Chronic that is just Brigid. That's who she is inside my head. And I'm glad that that character emerged as being as real and forceful to you in your reading as she was in my head.
We hear that all the time
Yeah.
from authors. We really do.
I used to be a journalist, so it was just the facts, no nonsense. But I would go to a conference or something like that. They would prop up some esteemed author, and somebody would raise their hand and say, "Oh, great esteemed author. How do you know what happens next in your books?" And the esteemed author would always say, "Well, my characters tell me what's going to happen next." And I would always think to myself, yeah, do your characters tell you you're a nut job too? Because that's what you sound like right now. Then I started writing fiction, and I'll be darned. Not only do they tell me what's going to happen next, if I'm writing a scene where I'm making them do something they don't want to do, the scene doesn't work. And it always takes me a little while to figure out, I'm sitting there at the computer going, God, why is this not right? Why does this not flow? What's happening here? And then I'll realize, oh, it's because I'm making Brigid do something she doesn't want to be doing, and therefore the scene isn't going. There's a lot of writing that is straight craft, but there is some of it that's art. And that is definitely the part that falls into the art category. And I am both terrified of it and endlessly thankful for it every time.
Well, I couldn't put this book down. Not only the location, but the story. It was a page turner that I just had to know what was going to happen next. Where did you get your idea for this story?
Oh, gosh. The where did you get your ideas question. Oh, we love it because we don't know. Neil Gaiman gives a funny answer to that. He says, I get my ideas from an idea shop in Schenectady, New York. For me, I don't plot anything out. I am what they call a pantser. I go by the seat of my pants. And my general rule is, as I'm writing, I can't be bored. Because if I'm bored, the writing will be bad. Plus, if I'm bored, probably chances are you're going to be bored reading it. I careen from one thing to the next and keeping myself interested. To keep myself interested, there have to be twists. And there have to be reversals, and people have to do unexpected things, and sometimes characters have to come in great danger. It's not like I keep a bag by my bedside and reach into it every time I need an idea, and oh, there it is. But no, if I get them from any place, my idea shop in Schenectady is actually, I go for a run, and inevitably what happens is, so there's some problem in the plot that I can't figure out how it's going to work. And what I start with is some self-loathing and some real pity. And then I start moaning to my wife, and I go, honey, I'm the worst writer who ever lived. Why didn't I just go to law school? My God. And my wife will look at me with concern on her face, and she'll say, well, honey, what did you do the last time you got stuck? I don't know. I just need to quit. And then she'll say, well, honey, I think you went for a run. And I'll go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go for a run. And I go on a run. And inevitably, about a mile or two in, the mist's clear and I see what's going to happen. And bang, I solve the problem. And I come back, I proudly put a foot up on a stool. So I really perch proudly and puff out my chest and say, honey, I am the greatest writer who ever lived. I figured it out. Pity my wife is the moral of this story. The poor woman puts up with a lot. But yeah, I go for a run.
I loved Matt Bronik because I'm a huge physics geek. The first character I come across is a physics professor, and he's working on an experiment with entanglement, and I'm all in. Would you consider writing a series with physics concepts as a theme? You've got Michael Crichton, who does the medical theme. You've got John Grisham, who does the legal theme. You could be Brad Parks, the physics guy. What do you think?
The physics guy, I'm down with that. So I am also a physics nerd, Kathy, and I have been for a long time. I'm actually more fascinated not by the actual doing of physics, because I was never all that great at it. I am fascinated by the story of physics and by the ideas of physics. And that has been a long-term love of mine. I had actually tried to write this book probably 3 or 4 other times. When I say this book, I mean a physics book, because I love physics and I love the characters of physics and the ideas about how it explains the world and whatnot. But every time I would approach the book, I just couldn't make it work. And I think for a long time, I was trying to fit my book to the physics. And then finally the brainstorm was, no. I need to fit the physics to my book. I came up with this notion of what if there was somebody who had gone missing and they use entanglement to find him. And once I kind of had that flash of inspiration, I was off and running. But I'm glad to hear you're drawn to the physics. Honestly, when I first pitched this at my editor, and most editors, mind you, are English majors or psychology majors or philosophy majors or something like that. And she got this look like, physics? You're going to write a book about physics? And I was like, trust me, it'll work. So I'm really heartened every time I hear someone say to me, I'm really not a physics person, but I totally loved the physics in this book because you explained it really well. That's what I'm driving for. So people listening, if you think physics, oh my gosh, I'm going to run away screaming, don't worry, we make it approachable.
I found it very engrossing. It was explained on a level that a dummy like me could understand.
That's good because it was written by a dummy like me. So we're right at the same level, Ann. It worked out well.
Sean Plotner. He's a rich techno kid, and I didn't really want to like him. He's a wannabe good guy, but he's not a real good guy. He's still out for Sean, but I ended up liking him. Is there a real Sean?
Nobody's actually asked me about Sean Plotner yet in my various interviews, so you're going to be the first one to get this answer. He is sort of loosely based on my wife's ex-boyfriend. The last guy she dated in college before she dated me ended up becoming this really rich guy who makes something like $50 million a year. And my poor wife, she ends up married to a starving author. So obviously there are a lot of parts about Sean Plotner that have nothing to do with my wife's ex-boyfriend. But the thing about my wife's ex-boyfriend that always drove me insane was not merely that he dated my wife before me, but he was this guy who could do exactly what Sean Plotner did. He would not show up for class all term. You would barely ever see him studying. He was so damn bright, he would get A's in every class. You couldn't figure out how the guy did it other than, wow, he just has a bigger brain than the rest of us. And he partied all the time, and he was drunk half the time. And how is this guy getting straight A's? I have no idea. But so I took that character and brought him into the finance world and made him really rich. But then going back to the theme of I have to like my characters, even Sean Plotner, who I based on this person I truly despise, ends up becoming likable. What's wrong with me, Ann? The problem is part of inhabiting a character is you have to see the humanity in them. And as soon as you see the humanity in someone, you kind of can't truly dislike them anymore, I think, or at least I can't. So I think that's what happened with Sean Plotner. I started off wanting to make him this guy you won't like at all. And lo and behold, he becomes likable, despite my best efforts to the contrary.
Brad, you're the only writer to win the Shamus, Nero, and Lefty Awards, 3 of American crime fiction's most prestigious prizes. To what do you credit your great success?
Gosh, I don't know. 2 loving parents who raised me well and gave me every opportunity in the world. People talk a lot about privilege these days. And like everything else, it's somehow taken on this political connotation that I don't really understand. But I grew up with a lot of privilege. My parents loved me. They always put my education first. They instilled a love of books in me. I'm just old enough that there was no such thing as YA novels when I was a kid. And so basically, once I graduated from Hardy Boys, there was nothing but the books my dad was reading. And my dad read crime fiction. From the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was reading Clive Cussler, D. MacDonald, and I was Ross MacDonald, and I was reading